Welcome to this video where we're going to be talking about one of the most basic checkmates in chess, which is the scholar's mate, or sometimes known as the four-move checkmate. This is a very common try at the beginner levels, and it begins with the move pawn to e4, opening up the diagonal for the queen, and then after pawn to e5, white can start to target the pawn on f7. The pawn on f7 is extremely vulnerable in chess because it's only defended by one piece, and that is the king itself. So a lot of the openings, especially all the king's pawn openings, play on this fact. For black, they also play on the weakness of the f2 square, right? So the kind of mirror pawn. Now, after e4, e5, white can play the bishop's opening, bishop to c4, or he can immediately bring the queen out to either f3 or h5. The idea to watch out for is a quick attack on the f7 point. Here, let's imagine that white goes bishop to c4, and now black plays knight to c6, developing a piece, and now white goes either queen to f3 or more commonly queen to h5. Here we see the attack on f7, and if black is not careful, he could play a move like knight to f6, attacking the queen, and many beginners have fallen for this basic trap. Queen takes f7, checkmate on the fourth move. This is the so-called scholar's mate. Now, it's important to avoid this happening to you. So if you are new to chess, you should know how to take care of this danger. Well, of course, it depends exactly how white attacks f7. But let's imagine that after pawn to e4, pawn to e5, white starts with the bishop's opening, bishop to c4. Already here, if you want, you can play the move knight f6. And with this move, you protect the square h5 and you also block the f-file. That means queen h5 is not an option because the knight would take the queen. And it also means that if you play queen f3, the knight is blocking the access to the f7 square, so there is no danger, and you can just continue to develop normally, maybe knight c6 or bishop c5, whatever you want. So this is the best way to avoid getting checkmated in this fashion. Now, the final thing that I want to say is that in this position, almost always, when your opponent starts bringing his queen out so early, you should be quite happy. Even though you need to be alert that you don't get checkmated fast, one of the most important things in chess is to know that in general, we should not move the queen too early because with all the pieces on the board, she can be harassed and pushed back, and white can end up wasting a lot of time. For example, in the move queen h5, which is the so-called Danvers opening or the wayward queen attack, we see that after knight to c6, defending the pawn, white can play bishop c4, targeting on f7 and threatening the mate, but after pawn to g6, the white queen is forced to spend time moving. The queen goes to f3 and renews the threat of checkmate, but black can continue to develop pieces, developing his knight and blocking the attack. After knight f6, white can even continue with his queen, queen b3, to continue to try and capture on f7. But so much time spent moving the queen around, a very typical thing that you will see beginners do, is actually going to spell disaster for white. Already after the move knight to d4, ignoring the capture on f7, black is in great shape. Imagine if white now captures, black says, that's not a problem, I move my king to e7. My king may not look so pretty on this square, but in the meantime, white's queen is attacked, and if the queen moves away, the bishop will fall. If, on the other hand, the queen stays trying to defend the bishop, then black can just attack the queen further, and notice there is no square for the queen. b3 is covered by the knight, c4 is hit by the pawn, d5 is covered by the knight, and e6 is covered by both the pawn and the knight and indeed the king. So white must move the queen away and black can just win this piece. The result of white's crazy play and reckless play with his queen making so many moves with the same piece in the opening has left him without a piece and in a lost position. So the moral of the story is, when you face the scholar's mate, you should be, as long as you're ready and you know how to prevent getting checkmated, you should be very happy to see these moves, because in general, moving the queen out so early and playing with the same piece all the time in the opening is the road to disaster for the side who does this. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and hopefully you will not get checkmated by the scholar's mate anytime soon in the future. So